This week, one of the readings in the lectionary is Luke 6, verses 17 to 26, which is the Sermon on the Plain, in contrast to the one in Matthew called the Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Plain, we're told these words. I'm going to read it to you from the New English Translation. It says, "Then he came down with them and stood on a level place. And a large number of his disciples had gathered, along with a vast multitude from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon. They came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and those who suffered from unclean spirits were cured. The whole crowd was trying to touch him because power was coming out from him and healing them all." Now that is chock full of a revelation of who Jesus is as it relates to the human condition and what the realm of God, the kingdom of God, makes accessible to us. We get excited about that. We are Pentecostal, charismatic, third wavers. We get excited about that. However, it says, then he looked up at his disciples. Now, mind you, he came down from a mountain and stood on a level place, in contrast in Matthew's gospel, where he ascends a mountain and sits down on an ascended place. There's a world of difference. We'll get into that in a moment. But when he looks up from that level place at his disciples, he gives them 4 blessings and 4 woes. Blessed are you poor, blessed are you who hunger, blessed are you who weep now, and blessed are you when people hate you. And equates all of that to the persecution of the prophets in the Old Testament, so that the disciples now are those who are considered the fulfillment of the prophets and all that they spoke of. But the blessed statements are 4. Then there are 4 woes. And it says, woe to you who are rich, woe to you who are well satisfied with food, woe to you who laugh, and woe to you when people speak well of you. So there are these blessings and there are these woes. Now the blessings, the blessed statements, are present both in Matthew's gospel and in Luke's gospel. The word means Makarios. And I think it's important to understand that that's an existing state of happiness. However, it's contingent on something, which, if we can understand the difference between the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon on the Plain, it'll help us to understand what that contingency is. When Jesus ascends the mountain in Matthew's gospel and sits down to teach them, he is reminiscent in many respects of Moses ascending Mount Sinai when he was given the law. However, Matthew is not interested in equating Jesus with Moses, because Matthew is clear that Jesus is far greater than Moses. But whereas Moses is the lawgiver on Sinai, Jesus is the fulfillment of the law in his very being. And so when Jesus sits down and makes the declaration of the blesseds, he is literally saying there is an existing state of authentic happiness that is available to you because I am the fulfillment of the law. Moses said all the laws of the covenant, and basically the law is do this and live. But it doesn't give us the ability to do it and live. It actually reveals that we don't have the ability to do it and live. And yet Jesus is the embodiment and the fulfillment of the law. And the existing authentic happiness that is available to us is because Christ is the way to please the Father. And that all that we do, we don't do by self-effort. We do by utter reliance on the Spirit of Christ, whose yoke is easy and whose burden is light. So in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus ascends the mount to give what some have called the Magna Carta of the kingdom, the realm of God. But in Luke's gospel, he descends the mount and stands with us in the place where we are. Yes, he's the ascended, transcendent Christ. but he is the God who is immanent and with us and who is touched with the feeling of our infirmities, which is why when he stands on that level place, everyone is attracted to him. Everyone wants to touch him. Everyone who's oppressed, everyone who wants to be healed, everyone who is dealing with unclean spirits, and Jesus heals them all. And many tried to touch him, but they couldn't reach him. And so there's a great work to be done. The harvest is plentiful, but Jesus needs disciples. And when Jesus begins to speak this Sermon on the Plain, he's not speaking to the entire multitude. He's speaking to those that have made the commitment to fully follow Jesus. Disciples are those who observe all that he commands. And the disciples need to hear that this existing state of happiness, this authentic happiness, is tied to understanding how to relate to the poor, how to relate to those that hunger and thirst, how to relate to those that mourn and weep, and how to embrace persecution and still rejoice. And we can't ignore the matters of dealing with the poor and that which requires us speaking truth to power. All those things are part of a radical commitment to following Jesus. Learning how to speak and care for and minister to those who are disenfranchised, those who are marginalized. Learning how to identify fully and realize that none of us have anything that we can call our own. We like the blesseds. The woes are not something we like to talk about, and yet the woes are so relevant to the day in which we live, because all of us are concerned based on the culture we live in and have been embedded in. You know, Walter Brueggemann talks about how we've been enculturated, how the church has been enculturated in a way that we don't realize how much we've been seduced by the consumer-driven world we live in. And yet there are woes that Jesus pronounces for people that are more concerned about their appearance, for people that are more concerned about materialism, for people that are more concerned about everybody speaking well of them. We've got an entire culture that's rife with that. And we'd rather hear the blessings and not hear the woes, or we would rather talk about healing and deliverance and miracles and signs and wonders. And yet, I wonder if those that follow Jesus and make the radical commitment to be disciples, if they embrace the blessings and the woes and allow Christ in them to flesh out that life, maybe people would start crowding around us as the church, and they would want to touch us and find healing presence in us. Maybe demonic forces would be delivered as they came into our sphere of influence in the realm of God. Maybe multitudes would start flocking to us because we represent the existing authenticity that is true happiness, because we are caught up in the one who came down to stand with us on a level place. On Sunday, we are going to continue to look at the development of our spiritual senses, cleansing the doors and the gates of our perception so that we can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell by the Spirit those things that are most holy, and understand how God, by processes of purification, brings us into that. You don't want to miss it. Bring a friend. It's going to be life-changing. I love you.